Work at a social media marketing and data firm in Hollywood called Speaker. And we are in the process of finishing up a rewrite of an old system built in Ruby and .NET into a series of Node microservices. And as an influencer marketing firm, we have to deal with social media APIs all the time. But the old system had no social media integration, so these APIs are new to everybody on the team. And we started out with Twitter. And if anybody wants to feel somewhat incompetent really quickly, you can open up the Twitter API docs and start reading. So, for example, I needed to figure out how to attach media to tweets. So I'm searching through the docs, and this is what I found. It's curl. It's actually not quite curl, it's twirl. This is Twitter's command line tool. And I had to take this and translate it into JavaScript that would run in Node. And some of you might say, no biggie. I have not joined your illustrious ranks yet. This is very difficult for me. So I did what any good Node developer does, and I hit up NPM, and I searched around. And I found quite a few Twitter packages. And there was one in particular that was really good, and it's called Twit. And if you ever have to work with Twitter's API, definitely use it. It's awesome. It made development really easy. But my pre-Twit days were not easy at all. So when my boss assigned all of the Facebook tickets to me, except for auth, I figured, no problem. I'll go to NPM, I will find a package, and I'll build some cool features. But before I went to NPM, I decided I should probably read through the docs a little bit, and I found that there are official SDKs for the Graph API. And that's awesome. And my hopes were raised very high. And then they crashed to the floor when I saw there's no Node. There's some client-side JavaScript. There is React in particular. But there's no Node SDK. So I didn't get too sad because I found Twit. I went to NPM. I searched around. And I did find one package called Facebook Node SDK. But here it is. Then I noticed it hadn't been updated since 2014. So that's an issue. I searched some more. I found a couple packages. None of them made me feel that great. The one that was the best, or what seemed to be the best, was a fork of the Facebook Node SDK. And let's talk numbers real quick. This number makes me feel good. I realize that these are just stars. What are stars? They're just stars. You click it, and it increases. But Twit has over 2,300 stars, and to me that seems that people are invested in this, or at least I hope they are. So if there's anything wrong with this, someone's going to fix it. Maybe even me, who knows. This number makes me nervous. This is the fork of the Facebook Node SDK. Granted, it has 207 stars. That's 200 stars more than any of my repos. But to use it in production, I just didn't think there was enough community around it to feel good about using this. If I needed to have buggy code, I'm going to use my own buggy code. So I did what any good JavaScript developer does, grabs his favorite tool. I was on my own, by the way. And my favorite tool is request promise. I love using request promise in Node. So I had 4 tasks that I had to complete. The first was searching brand pages. So this is just any old Facebook page like the Fiat page, the Campbell Soup page, whatever page. There's a search endpoint in the Graph API for that. I had to retrieve user data, and there's a Graph object endpoint. So whenever you want data for any one thing, whether it's a photo or a video or a user or a page, there's just a Graph object endpoint. I also needed to get a list of pages that each user manages, and there's an accounts route for that, or accounts endpoint. And last, I had to figure out how to post to the pages that a user manages. This is the fun one. And there's 3 endpoints for a text post. There's the feed endpoint, photos go to the photos endpoint, videos to the videos endpoint. So it started off with search, because it seemed to be the most straightforward. I went to the docs. It was actually a little bit difficult to find where the search documentation was, but when I found it, it was beautiful. Because this, to me, resembles a URL. And if it resembles a URL, then I can construct that URL using request promise. So that's what I did. And this is the code I came up with. So I require request promise. I send off the request at the bottom. All the action is always in the options object. So this is a GET request. I'm hitting the search endpoint. And then the query string has 4 properties. Access token, the query, which is just what you're typing in the search box. The type, which is page in this case, because I'm searching pages rather than users, locations, events, or something like that. And then the fields that I want back. And there's 2 very important things about this query string. First, you need an access token. If you don't have an access token, you will get no response. And the second are the fields. This API will return some data by default, but it is very little. In fact, often it's just an ID. So you have to specify what you want to retrieve. In this case, I wanted name, category, link, picture, and is verified. Is verified is like that blue check mark next to all the cool kids pages. So the other thing about fields is just because you request a field doesn't mean you're going to get it back, because a lot of them are protected. So if a user, for example, their profile, they have nothing set to public, then you won't be able to get things like their relationship status or something like that. You can ask for it. It won't error out, but it won't get returned. So this is what a response looks like from search. You have 2 properties that come back. You have data and paging. We're going to ignore paging. And then we have everything that I asked for: name, category, link, picture, which is the profile picture, is verified, and ID. And that's enough to build up a UI of search results. You know, we have like a line item. It's got the profile picture. It's got the name of the page that you can wrap in an A tag, and now it's a link, and whether it has that blue check mark. So that's a decent piece of UI from this data. So let's look at the code for this. So the actual route, which is right here. This is the search route. Up top, the search term, it's just the query parameter name. The options object is all familiar to you by now. And the new part is the Facebook response. Parse it, send it back up to Postman in this case. So let's make sure that this code works. So here we are. The name query parameter is JavaScript. We'll see what comes back. Let's pray that it works. And there it is. So if I close the data property, we have paging at the bottom. Each one of these is a page. So we have JavaScript, the entertainment website. JavaScript, the interest. There you go. You can see what's going on there. The second thing I had to do was get user data. And this is what user data looked like. This field set, this is a pretty intense list. You need to have a good amount of permissions in order to get all this data. But the options object is where the action is again. It's a GET request. It goes to the graph object route, access token, and then the fields. And again, this access token, if you just have a kind of like the freebie access token that Facebook will give you, you're not going to get half of these fields back. So to get any kind of permissions from Facebook, you have to build an app that actually works. You have to host it so they can look at it, make a quick write-up about your app, and actually record a video about how users will go through your app and exactly why you need the permissions that you're asking for. And it's kind of hard. So I'm making this demo app for this talk, and I think I'm doing a good job. They don't give me anything. So I can get information about myself, but I can't even get any data from my pages through the API. So it's a little bit difficult. But what the response looks like when you ping the user data route, the graph object route, here it is. Everything that we asked for, including accounts, which is pages that I manage. And then let's say in my app, I want to give a snapshot of the user's most recent activity, because they're going to go to my app, they're going to see all their profiles, all their social media profiles, and kind of get a glimpse as to what will the world see if they go to that social media platform and look up that person. So in this case, I also want photos. Let's say I want to display the last 5 photos. I requested photos. I got photos. Inside of the photos, we have a data property with an array, but you see there's created time and ID. And if there were a caption to that photo, you'd also see the caption. But there's no URL. And if I'm building a UI, I need a URL. And this reveals a fundamental characteristic of the Graph API. And that is that this API is very withholding. It will give you just a little bit. You ask, it'll give you exactly what you ask for. And it'll kind of assume what you want more, and it won't give you that. So then you have to make another request. And this is a good example of that. So if I want to display these photos, I make this one request. Then I parse the response. I go to that data array. I map over it and make a request for every photo asking for the link field. And then I get that back. And this is what that code looks like. And this pattern I had to use over and over and over again. So first, just get the information from the user. And in this case, I only want the photos back, let's say. Then I parse the response. And number 2, I don't know if you can see number 2, but number 2 says make a request for each photo in the array. So we have URL promises. I'm mapping over the photos array and throwing each photo into this getPhotoURL function, which is down here, which just pings the graph object endpoint requesting the link. I get that response, parse it, and return just the link. So I do that for every photo. Then here, I pop the URL promises into promise.all. I wait till all of them come back, and then I return an array of URLs to the photos. I can send that up to the client, and now I can display what I wanted to, user information and the last 5 photos. So third, user pages. And after doing search, and then after working with user data and finding out that I need to make many requests after I get a single response back, this wasn't a big deal. We have a pretty straightforward options object. It's a get request. The user ID, let's say that that's my Facebook user ID, and then we're going to hit the accounts route with my access token, so I can see a list of my own pages. And this is what the response looks like. To the left, we have Loren's js.la tester. To the right, we have my page Code More. And again, you can't even build a UI out of this. Or I guess you can, but it'll be a very basic UI. We don't have a photo. We don't even have a link to the page. So again, we would make this one response to get a list of all my pages, then map over that list, that array, and make a request for every item. So again, it's a very withholding API. And fourth is the fun one, posting. And so as I said earlier, there's 3 different endpoints. There's the feed endpoint for text. Uploading images goes to the photos endpoint, and the videos endpoint for uploading videos. And let's say that I want to upload an image, for example. This is what that post request is going to look like. So in the options object, it's a post. User ID /photos is the route you have to hit. And then the query parameters access token, always required. And again, this is going to be a hard one to get. So publishing to users' pages is pretty difficult. The caption is optional, and then the URL is required. We make that request. And by now, you probably know that that response is not going to be very adequate. And here it is. This is the code right below that request. Commented out is just an ID. So that's what you get back from an image post. And again, you parse that. Then you have to make another request to the graph object route. So we take the ID from the post that we just created, and then we hit the graph object endpoint with it, indicate that it's a post, and we want the permalink URL. We send off that request, parse, and then send the link back. So that's how we would upload an image. And this one, I did build a UI to prove that this code works. And here it is. So let me get an image URL. So my feed is all I can really post to. Image, send in that URL. Hi, kitty. So I'm going to post, and it should send a URL back. And I'll have a link to click. Oh, and there it is. So we click that. And on my Facebook page is a cat. Woohoo! So by now, you understand that this API, it's a withholding API. And I emphasize that because when I first started working with the Graph API, I thought there was something wrong with my requests. Maybe there was something wrong with my access token. Why couldn't I get back the data that I wanted? For instance, for the photos that didn't have the URL, I assumed that that was a permissions thing. It's like, all right, we'll give you the ID, but you cannot see these photos. Those are private. So if you understand that you're going to make one request, and that's going to be kind of like the seeds for all your further requests, you'll be much better off when you get started with the Facebook Graph API. So by now, I think you understand that there's only one way to query this API, and that's to query the shit out of it. And I wrote a blog post that has more code and more explanation, and it's at lorenstewart.me. Thank you.
Okay, we got time for a couple questions. Right there.
It would seem like this is the sort of thing that GraphQL is designed to handle. Why are they not doing this?
Well, you know what? I think that there's a GraphQL layer that I'm hitting, because I'm just specifying the fields, and then they're sending it back, and I'm pretty sure that that's actually how GraphQL works.
You can't do all the stuff in the graph.
No. No. They don't let us play with that.
Any other questions? Okay, give it up for Loren.